Hello chess friends and welcome to Zarov's chess channel and welcome to a very exciting tournament that's going on now these days. It's a mini tournament between the three top engines that are playing these days. It's of course Leela C Zero, Stockfish the computer version, and this efficiently updatable neural network based chess engine Stockfish. So it's this new version of Stockfish and this is really an incredible tournament. Check it out. The link to the tournament is in the description below, so you can maybe analyze some more games for yourself. So far, Leela C Zero is in the lead, and it's also sort of a redemption path by Leela because Leela lost the super match in the TCEC Season 80 Super Final, but also lost many games against this NNUE version. And so far, Leela C Zero is kicking in all. And in this game that I wanted to show you today, Leela made her redemption with an immortal, really an immortal queen sacrifice in the line defense. So it's really incredible for me, and I have been asked now many times why do I analyze this game so much, because as I always like to say, and I'm going to repeat it again, these are really the best chess games that we can play, because in some variations, maybe in some sidelines you have troubles, you're maybe scared to play this particular line, but when I see that Leela C Zero, Stockfish, or maybe another great engine plays this line, then of course I can maybe solve sort of one particular opening and then can go into my familiar sidelines, maybe go more aggressively into the game. So that's why it's really important to analyze these games, also to see these games, and in the future I'll create also this engine games in separate playlists. For instance, we'll have this Leela C Zero Stockfish games in the King's Indian. We'll have Leela C Zero versus Stockfish NNUE maybe in the NNU Indian. So you can then sort it off, and you can have maybe a great preparation in particular opening. So let's check out now the game. In the line defense, here Leela C Zero with the white pieces opened with the move E4. D6 by Stockfish NNUE. So here D4, knight to F6, knight to C3, and now after knight to D7 we have the so-called line defense. My recommendation here against this line is to go with the move F4, because black hasn't challenged the center immediately. Now after the move E5, you see with knight to F3 we can recapture both of the pawns with the minor piece. So if e takes d4 or e takes f4 happens, then we simply get out actively with one of these pieces, and we have of course this three advanced pawns in the center. So far a good development, and the main problem for black in this setups is that the light square bishop is blocked out. It's blocked out by its own knight. So black in this particular variations has problems to develop the bishop on c8. So here one of the ideas that black can play is to simply release the pressure in the center a little bit with e takes d4 or even e takes f4. Here queen to d4 is of course perfectly fine. You can also take with the knight, but I like this idea to not to play with the same piece twice. So we have already played with our knight, so if we recapture with the knight, knight takes d4, then we have played twice with the knight. So far we have developed also the queen. Maybe the queen is a little bit endangered here, but at least you have three pieces out, two minor pieces and the queen, and maybe we're two more moves far away from castling. For instance, we can go bishop to e3 and queenside castling. So it's a fast developing style here so far by Leela C Zero. Stockfish NNUE continued with the move c6, creating the so-called Boleslavsky wall pawn structure setup. It's a restriction idea, but also flexible idea. First of all, these two pawns are restricting, of course, these four very important centralized squares, but also the tactical idea is then in some occasions to push the pawn on d5, and also we have the opportunity to develop our queen to b6, then to challenge the pawn on b2. So far, normal theory of this line defense. Here bishop to e3, and now you see this move d5. In the game e5, played by Leela C Zero, knight to g4 by Stockfish NNUE, bishop to g1, and now queen to b6, forcing the trades of queens. And Leela C Zero simply castles. We don't want to take. There is also this principle in chess which says to take is a mistake. When we have such a tension, when many pieces can be traded, you should wait your opponent to take. You shouldn't take first. That's the rule. As I said, that to take is a mistake. Here after the move queenside castling, there are now several choices. Here In the game, bishop to c5 was played by Stockfish NNUE, and we have now queen to d2. Bishop takes g1, we have rook takes g1, and there is maybe a tactical threat, but I don't think yet you should be scared here, because after knight to h2, it seems that black has gained the pawn, and that black can continue here with a better position. But my recommendation here is to simply play bishop to e2. After knight takes f3, bishop to f3. Okay, maybe black has grabbed the pawn, but believe me or not, white is much better here. First of all, if black castles now immediately kingside, then we can open the h-file. There are several tactical threats on the h-file. The knight doesn't have good squares to develop. Knight to c5 could be maybe a possibility, but I believe that in some occasions, if you calculate it well, we can also go bishop to d5, knight takes d5 as a tactical threat. It could be possible. So castle kingside is not a possibility. You see black has developing problems. We can even play g4, f5, f6 in order to split pawns in front of the king. So although, as I said, white is a pawn down in this particular line, white has really a comfortable game. So after the move here, bishop takes g1, rook takes g1, knight to c5, played by Stockfish NNUE, and we have now rook to e1. The idea is, of course, to restrict, first of all, this knight jump on e4. We have castling by Stockfish, and now h3. Now knight to f2. Very interesting idea here. Stockfish goes all in. This game, from this point on, is really a great tactical battle. After knight to f2, the problem is, of course, you cannot take queen to f2 because you get a discovered check, knight to g3 with an attack on the king, and you lose the queen on f2. So g4 played by Leela C Zero, with ideas to finally crack the position in front of the king, f5, f6, as I said. Here we want even to sacrifice some pawns, maybe just to open the g file, maybe just to open the h file, maybe just in order to open some diagonals. Here we are really playing into this common opposite side attack games in which you have to be faster in order to win the game. So here in the game, rook to d8 played by Stockfish NNUE. Very interesting idea to get this pawn rolling. This is also now a Stockfish counterplay idea, but because if we again recapture with queen to d4 or similar ideas, then again we risk this knight to b3 tactical threat, again with queen to b6 idea. So again, Stockfish is preparing a similar tactic in the game, queen to e3, because if you try maybe here to escape with the king from this dark squares in order to not get this very annoying check, then I believe that black has a comfortable game after the move knight to e4, because you see you cannot take knight takes e4, d takes e4 will happen with a discovered attack on the queen, and you lose the game immediately. So now you see black has a perfect connection between these knights, can also push pawns further with c5, d4, c4. So it's I believe in this top engine game level, it's a winning game here for Stockfish. So that's why king to b1, you see, it's not possible. Leela C Zero has to stay with the king on c1, risking again this tactical threats. In the game, queen to e3 was played, and now Stockfish plays a very interesting pawn sacrifice. After knight takes d4, we have now rook takes d4. As I said, after queen to d4, knight to b3 will happen. So here Leela C Zero tried queen to f2. In the game, g5 played by Stockfish, and now we have f5. Let's see again what happens if you try this idea king to b1 in order to escape from this tactical threats. Then you get knight to a4. The problem is now, whatever you do, first of all, we have this checkmate threat. That's why you would be forced to take knight takes a4, but now rook to d1. After rook takes d1, we have queen to f2. And this is now huge difference between this position and when you have your pawn on f5, because now white needs another extra tempo in order to connect the rooks, because the rook on g1 is also hanging. So that's why you are forced to play the move bishop to d3, and now queen to f4. Here I think black has a comfortable game. Here black is winning for sure. So that's why after the move g5, you see in this particular position, Leela C Zero didn't play this move king to b1, simply passed through with the move f5, and we have now knight to f4. Again, a similar tactical threat. After knight to f4, we have rook to d1, king to d1, and now queen to f2. But there is a huge difference now, as I said, in this particular line that we have analyzed before. The pawn is not on f4, and now after bishop to d3, it's a playable game for both sides. Maybe slightly better here for white, because although black doesn't have the queen, pardon me, white doesn't have anymore the queen, but has an extra rook and a knight for the queen, and also a pawn. So the more important thing about this pawn structure is now that these pawns can roll on, and these pawns can be pushed further in order to create a new pass pawn situation. So it's a very important thing in continuation of the game. Here, queen to f3, we have rook to e2, we have king to g7, and now knight to c3, regrouping, simply getting all of our pieces compact, because when you don't have maybe the queen on the board and you're playing against your opponent's queen, then you should really have a compact position, sort of glued together position with your pieces. You shouldn't have them loose all over the board, because then you always risk some double attacks by the queen on some pieces. So there should be really compact, glued together. So in the game, bishop to d7, we have king to c1, rook to e8, and now king to b1. Leela C Zero simply improves the position of the king. We have c5, and now bishop to e4. Queen to f4. Here, if you try maybe queen to h3, it's losing. You cannot do that because you risk this move f6 after king to f8, rook to h1. You have to move the queen somewhere, maybe to g3, and here rook to h2. Now you cannot protect this pawn anymore, and you risk even some checkmate threats here on the 8th rank. So that's why in the game, queen to f4, played by Stockfish NNUE, and we have now rook to d1, attacking the bishop. Bishop to c6 was played, and now bishop, first e6, after f takes e6, bishop takes c6, and now after b takes c6, we have now a new position after rook to e1, in which, again, we have created this pass pawn situation. If you try maybe to pass through, it's not such a powerful idea. We can play rook to e4. In the game, rook to e7 was played, and now simply f takes e6. So let's stop a little bit and evaluate the position now, because the position is now much more simplified with more clear ideas of an endgame. And this is, believe me or not, a simply winning endgame here for white. The problem for black is that black is always stuck with this rook. The rook cannot move because wherever the rook moves will simply continue to push our pawn, and will create again some attacking possibilities. This knight is a very important piece now, as it has this certain flexibility. This knight will always find a way into the game. What we shouldn't do is, for instance, maybe lose this h3 pawn. That cannot happen, because if that happens, then black could maybe have a winning game, because black could have maybe a pass pawn situation for himself, because then black could continue here with the 2 versus 1 situation on the king side. So what we should do is to regroup, maybe play something like rook to e3, and search here a position with our knight. Maybe the best square for the knight would be the f5 square. If we manage to remaneuver the knight there, then it's of course game over here for black. So c4 played by Stockfish, we have a3, king to g8. I'm going to skip a little bit faster these moves now, because we understand now the strategy of this endgame. So let's see now how Leela C Zero applied this strategy. Here, queen to f2, we have rook to e3, queen to h4. Now again a remaneuver of the knight. Very important move here, this move knight to a2, because it forces again a pawn move by Stockfish NNUE, and again you see how flexible this knight can always jump around a little bit and attack further these 3 weaknesses, because these are all isolated pawns, so we can take them whenever we like. So knight to c3, we have queen to h6, knight to a4, queen to f6, rook to e5, here queen to f4, knight to b6, rook to queen to d4, and now you see Leela C Zero grabs another pawn. Again, no chance here for Stockfish to get somehow into the game. In the game, Stockfish tried king to h8, but it's really nothing special. Nothing can happen here. Basically, you cannot include this rook into the game. That's the most important positional problem here for black. King to g8, then we have knight to c3, h6, rook to e3. We have queen to f4, again rook to e4, and now queen to d6, and now simply pushing further. We have now a new pass pawn situation. We can again create here pass pawn with a potential g5 move, king to f8, g5, h takes g, h takes g, queen to d2, and again rook to e5, queen to f2, and now rook to e2 attacking the queen. If you try a check, it doesn't bring you so much. We'll simply hide with our king on a2. You cannot do some perpetuals. It's impossible because your own pawn here on c4 stands in the way, so no perpetuals, as I said, are possible. Queen to b6, here king to a2, king to g7, and now rook to f5. We can maybe even try something like g6 here, and then rook to f7, forcing trades of rooks in the game. King to g6 was played, and now rook to e5. Again, Stockfish searches for positional improvements of the knight here, trying to get this knight somehow into the game, and now Stockfish finds a really interesting idea, knight to e5, because if you take, then you have to really trade off more pieces here. If you try knight to e6, queen to e6, then you risk this move, and you see we can take this rook. You would be forced to give up maybe some material, and it's of course a winning endgame here for white. So after the move, knight to e5, knight to e4, queen to e5 was played, and now c3. Also a very important idea here, c3, because we're not allowing again this very tricky move c3, because if you allow black to open this light square diagonal, then maybe, but just maybe, black could go with some perpetuals. c3, very nice defensive move, and here king to g7. We have knight to f6, queen to d6, and now king to a1. Queen to d3, and now knight to h5, attacking the king, king to f8, and now again a little bit moving around with the knight here, and now after g6 we have advanced a new pawn. This is really a dangerous position for black. a4, we have rook to f1. Again, simple ideas. Maybe here knight to a5, knight to h5, rook to f7. Again, the same tactical threat. Here queen to h2, rook to e4. You have to be patient here, of course, because black can always counterplay with the queen and the rook, but now after rook to b7, now you see again black is forced to create a blockade against this advanced pawn. Here Stockfish tried queen to h4 because e7 is not a possibility so far, but now king to a2. Again, this idea rook to e7 to create a blockade, and now very important move, rook to d2, because now we're threatening here rook to d7. Everything is protected, as I said. The knight is protected by the rook, the knight is protecting the pawn. So see how Leela C Zero maneuvered the knight a little bit all over the board just in order to create a winning endgame. So rook to e8, we have rook to d7. This is now a very active rook of Leela C Zero's here, queen to h8, and now rook to f7. Finally, we got our goal here. The rook is very active, queen to g7, and here it was basically game over. You can also take, of course, the queen after a couple moves. Stockfish NNUE resigns. So incredible game in this line defense with a beautiful queen sacrifice. Leela C Zero, as I said, is in the lead. Is really demolishing Stockfish and Stockfish NNUE. So it's really a redemption path here, Leela C Zero. But we can always say, I basically don't care who wins this. It's just that everyone who is creating this computer chess engines, they're working so hard in order to improve them, in order to get also our chess better. And first of all, we should always be thankful for the developers of Stockfish and Leela C Zero, because it gives us really opportunities and to get better, to see more lines and sidelines. And this is really an incredible chess era. I really enjoy these games, and I hope that you understand why am I covering so many games, because these are really, as I said, the best chess games that we can follow. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. Meanwhile, you can watch my other commented chess games played by computers. As I said, in the future I'll sort them out in separate playlists by openings. And if you want to see the best chess games played by humans, you can also check out my best chess games of all time series. And you can also subscribe to my channel if you like this content. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.